Hello, welcome to the Forward Pass. This is our second episode. Um, who knows when we'll get to episode 12,000 like Joe Rogan, but we're starting with 2 and then we'll do 3 and see where it goes. We're doing this every month, and this is the podcast where experienced technical AI entrepreneurs talk about LLMs, and we talk shop. We talk as technical as we think. We go deep. So this podcast is for anyone who's building with the latest AI tech and who wants to push the boundaries of what's possible. Every month we'll talk about the problems that we are facing when we are building our products, the technical developments that impact folks like us in the AI entrepreneur space, and our unique perspective on where the industry is headed. So it'll be kind of a combination of concrete challenges that we're facing while trying to scale, as well as our own projections of where we think things are going to go. So if you're someone who's building with LLMs and you want to get better at this craft, then please join us for the next hour or so. Combined across the 4 of us, we have over 50 years of experience building software. And so, yeah, we are experts in the space, and you should listen to us. Please listen to us. So I'm Tyler. We've got Ray, Chris, and Dan. If you guys want to maybe each introduce yourselves. Last month we did that at the very end, which was kind of awkward. So let's do it at the beginning this time. Dan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Tyler. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Schwartz. I have a startup called Future Search. We're using AI to predict the future. Previously, I spent many years at Google until LLMs maybe get into the forecasting world and then into the startup world. And I'm happy to be talking to you guys.
Cool. Ray?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Ray Fernando. Used to be an engineer at Apple for 12 years. Worked on many complicated systems and stuff, very low level stuff to very user interface things. Was beginning members of the Apple Watch team as well. Worked a lot in the health organizations, and now I'm basically on my own doing AI. I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm doing a lot of live streaming and live stream coding with AI and using these tools every day and trying to solve different business problems.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm Chris. Yeah, worked at a variety of companies, but worked with Tyler, and previously before that, kind of in the graphics world, at Pixar for a while, and currently now consulting and kind of advising on a variety of projects. But yeah, working with a lot of the latest AI tools, and spending quite a bit of time kind of in like the image and video generation area currently.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I'm Tyler. I was the founding engineer at Calm, scaled that up to the #1 mental health app. Learned a lot there, but it's not really an AI company. And then a couple of years ago, with a friend of mine who also was a Calm alum, we started an AI therapy company called Mental. So that's what we're working on now. And we think we have the world's best AI therapist. So everything you hear me say will be kind of from the context of what I've learned trying to build an emotionally intelligent AI agent, which is what we're building. Okay, awesome. So we have a couple of meaty topics today. Dan gave us the juicy details that he has insider knowledge on a drop that has not occurred yet. So he can't share what it is. He's mummed to secrecy, but maybe next month we'll have more to share on that from Dan. But on the docket today, we'll start off with probably the most prominent, and I think one of the most one of the AI stories that in the past year even like has spread beyond like AI people and kind of like been visible by the world, which is this like Studio Ghibli wave. I think like if you didn't get a Studio Ghibli portrait of you and your wife from your husband, and you should be worried that your husband is like texting it to someone else, because like everyone got got the flirty message from their husband if he's on Twitter. So I'm sure you guys have all seen these, but I think the particular thing that I found interesting, and that maybe we can start talking about, is the fact that the way that they trained the model was fundamentally different than this diffusion-based approach. And that's the reason why they were able to solve like I think, two things that have been very difficult to solve in the past with these models. One is like having really realistic text that like has like beautiful fonts, and you can just write out and say like it should say this paragraph, and then it does, in a way that's like fully baked into the image, which is unbelievable and incredible, and it looks amazing and is probably going to change marketing workflows in particular a lot. That plus the fact that you can ask it to edit, so you can say like keep it exactly the same except just like change what he's holding in his hand from like a spoon to a knife, and it will, and it'll be basically pixel perfect, the same for every other pixel except for that knife will change into a spoon or whatever. And that's also a new thing that we have not seen from these diffusion models. And my understanding is both of those breakthroughs come from the way that this is trained. It's actually an autoregressive based approach. It's like a token based approach to images. So yeah, if anyone has any other thoughts on that or has read anything about the implications of that, would love to hear it. But I think it's fascinating that we're still in a world where like just basic breakthroughs on like, it seems like we've had the transformer now for a couple of years and everyone's like, oh, we figured out how to do images, we figured out how to do text, but it's like there's still just like some basic stuff that like we're just trying out. We're still so early in like the design space of what's possible. So
I think I just have more questions because I'm just trying to learn a little bit more about it. And is this just a feature of the Omni models and its training of its understanding its world and generating the world that it's trying to understand, and kind of, because that's what I understand from the Omni models. It can take speech, it can take vision, it can take text, and then kind of create its own little environment, and then kind of add its, know exactly what you're talking about, whether you're giving it voice, whether you're giving it text, and then try to make that in this environment. But then it sounds like there's additional things that are specifically focused on images to do this kind of look back and say, okay, now this is not what I'm supposed to generate. Let me just go back and do another pass on this. Is that kind of, are we talking about like many tools here that are being used, or is it just kind of one model?
Yeah, good question. It's definitely an Omni model for sure. I think the way that they generate the images is fundamentally different, which is the reason why you see them scanning down and they kind of like unblur and then come in like linearly, whereas like the diffusion models don't. So I think they do the first pass, at least in the UI, is like almost like an unblurring. It's like it seems like the first few steps are like that, but then after that, it comes in like line by line, and that's not something we've seen in the past. And that's what I mean by autoregressive, meaning it predicts like the first pixel in the top left, and then the second pixel in the second spot, and then the third pixel. Like it's based on pixels, and that's a fundamentally different model than like the pure unblurring effect that the diffusion models have used. And it makes sense why that's significantly more steerable, in the sense that you can say like keep all the pixels the same except until you get to what's in his hand, kind of like more like a text base, because obviously LLMs are autoregressive in that same way, where you can't say the second word in the sentence until you've said the first word. Chris, do you have any more to share on that, or have you read anything about the implications of that shift in how the tech is working?
Yeah, it is definitely like a shift in, I think, like the way that you're working with these image generation models, and it is through kind of like directions in a prompt where you can say, edit this image so that this red car is green, or whatever it is, and that type of direction will give you a lot of the time it will give you the image exactly the same, except for it'll do what you asked for, basically, without changing the rest of the image. While previously you would have to use kind of like what's called kind of like an in-painting method, but you would kind of segment or mask just the car, and then run basically like diffusion passes on that. So having noise and reducing the noise in those areas until it clarifies into what you want.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of like a shift in the tool itself, but also like how people are using these, and giving it basically like directions instead of just a prompt, positive and negative prompts and things. So it's kind of a cool shift. It like in practice, I've seen it produce like really impressive results for certain types of style, like photorealistic images. You could have, a picture of a person and say like a picture of a product, like say like electronic, or like say a bottle of shampoo or something, and say you want this person holding this product, and it will
Incredible.
absolutely do that very, very well. And but and I think that's a little bit harder to do in the previous kind of like it can be done for sure, but it not quite as easy as just prompting like put these two things together.
Wow.
So that's been kind of like a leap forward in almost like image combining and editing.
Yeah.
And it is worth mentioning too that like the Google like AI studio, there's like the Gemini 2.0 Flash like, with like image generation, that has this same kind of like capability as like the
Okay.
so they're both very good.
Is that like something that just launched a while ago, or was it launched like the same week as OpenAI's?
It was pretty close. Like in my understanding, I think it was not. It was launched before the OpenAI one, but it was not too far before. Like maybe a week or so, maybe. Yeah. To tell, but
I think that's a really interesting example of one of there's this AI world changes so fast. There's always new updates, but I think we're starting to get to a point now. It's been a couple of years that like there are certain themes in the way that the industry is working that I think are, themes that have occurred enough that we can call them actual patterns. And one of those that I've noticed, one of the few places to kind of like have a foothold, is that like there are no secrets in AI. And what I mean by that is that like it seems like there's this almost uncanny fact that like as soon as one lab does something in public, like within like days, there's another lab that does the same thing. And like I don't really understand exactly the mechanism. Maybe you guys do better, but like what exactly is the mechanism there? Is it just that like there's certain downstream papers that maybe most people didn't read, but certain people did read, and then like, 6 months later, like both labs have come up with like the implication of that paper, and they kind of launch it in the same time because like the compute clusters have certain bottlenecks, and so they take a similar time to train or something like that? Or is it that like they're actually just like swapping intel like behind the scenes, meaning like employees are moving fast enough and they have enough zeros after their offer letter that they're just like, yeah, sure, I'll switch to this other company and just tell you guys everything. Like I think there's some of that going on too, but it seems like that's wouldn't be enough to create this level of like almost coordination that I see. So anyways, that's a bit of an aside, but like it's just something I've noticed that it's almost a universal thing. It's like these reasoning models, like OpenAI was like, we have a reasoning model, and then like a month later there were like 5 other, like I don't know, it just seemed like crazy like how quickly that stuff came out. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing I've observed.
Yeah, my hunch is like one will launch and the other companies have stuff in the works, and it's like this.
That's right.
Hey, they launched like let's just get this out, kind of a thing. It's almost like a push, to like.
But why do they all have the same thing in the works? I mean, I guess I think you're right. That's probably actually a better explanation for why the timing of the launches are so close together. But why do they all have the same things in the works? Is it just that like we're still in the low-hanging fruit and the ideas are actually pretty obvious, and so everyone has the same ideas? Is that what it is, or is there something else going on?
I think there are spies, like kind of the conventional type of spy, as in, oh, 4 of my housemates work at OpenAI and they keep talking about this, and that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like those little hacker houses in Hayes Valley, right? That's where all the alpha swaps.
Or cool. The bars. I remember that was a big deal when I worked at Apple. It was like they had literally a bar that was across, like in the same parking lot, and they would just warn you not to say anything that could be overheard, because literally physical real spies would actually hang out at the bars and drink and just listen to conversation. What are the people actually talking about? So, I mean, the same thing could be going on in bars in various places in San Francisco. Yeah.
All our phones are bugged. Okay, cool. I mean, I actually think the biggest implication for the industry will be the text. The ability to do text like right in the image seems like a huge breakthrough to me. But I'm not a marketer, and I've talked to some marketers who have talked about how they see that being the transformational piece here, because that was very hard to do before. To make tech, you'd have to basically just slap it on. It's like, okay, we got this diffusion model, now go into Photoshop and add the text, which is fine. I mean, a decent designer can do that, but it just adds so much bandwidth to the cycle, and then it's now like human in the loop. And so you can't do these automated things where you're like, let's make 10,000 different ads, or like, let's hook up an LLM to the image output process and have them both like cook together, right? So like, I feel like that making that text rendering baked into like the loop is going to be a significant thing for like, especially for digital marketers, people doing Facebook and Google ads, mostly Facebook, Instagram ads. It's going to be a big thing for those folks. Cool. Okay. Next thing on our docket, number 2, is Chris, you wanted to share a little bit about some of the new video models that have come out. And just by the way, for the listener, usually this podcast is heavily focused on LLMs, but I would say we have maybe a 80-20 or maybe 70-30 kind of mix between LLMs versus image and more art kind of models, video and image models. For whatever reason, today's docket is a little more heavy on the art side, but just a note on that. Yeah, Chris, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of the work I've been doing most recently has been kind of like video generation, like content generation, and I'd say like the most recent like big launch was Runway ML launched like their Gen 4 video. So I've been kind of like putting that through its paces. Against some of the other kind of like leading tools that I've been using, like Kling,
Right.
has been kind of like really good for certain styles. But I guess one big takeaway I've had is a lot of this, both in the image generation and video kind of worlds, are there's a big variety of models for both, and they each have like almost like what they specialize in, and so if you want like this cinematic photorealism type of look, there are certain models that are like, they really excel at that, versus if you're doing like 2D illustrations, or more of this like hand-drawn look, there's better models for that, or kind of elsewhere. And so I just like, for folks that are trying out different things, I'd say like, be open to trying these models. Like you mentioned text generation, Tyler, like there's Ideogram has like a new 3.0 kind of model that's like really great at text in terms of like stylized text. But the say like OpenAI like latest image generation is really good at like, if you want long text, getting that right. So there's all these like little
Sorry. I apologize. But things like products, like you realize how crucial that is when you have, like you were talking about, the bottle of shampoo, and like if you can't get the text right, it's a deal breaker. So anyways, I interrupted you. Keep going.
No, yeah, that's kind of like the main thing is just, there's new models coming out, certainly monthly, but like maybe every other week there's like a new one that comes out that I'll just kind of like spend a couple hours trying it out and see if it's great at the style whatever it is that I'm doing. So yeah, there's others that are great at, like, if you need very fine tuned like specific camera controls, there's certain models for that. So yeah, I just been kind of like collecting a whole notebook of like listing new models, listing kind of like strengths, weaknesses, and just kind of, that's kind of like my reference guide now, is doing that.
Is that something you're sharing, or is that just your own internal thing?
I've shared it with like companies I'm working with, just internally, so they have all that as well, and teaching kind of like different teams to like use that. But yeah, I'm happy to share it, and kind of go over that. And I'd say like probably I could add this latest round of stuff. I know there's like two or three that I would want to include in there that have just been, I've just tried out and kind of put through its paces. So yeah.
Are you willing? Feel free to decline a hot mic, but are you willing to share it now and just share your screen and go through it for 3 minutes or on the podcast, or would you prefer to keep it, kind of your own personal alpha when you're
Yeah,
working?
no, I'm happy. Let me see if I can bring it up and just read. I would probably like put it through, copy it into like a different doc and stuff, before like sharing my screen. But
Okay.
um, yeah, and there's some like hot takes in there from me, where it's like this is like I've never gotten it. I just, and I'm fine sharing that. Like I remember just um, some of these are like very hyped kind of like launches, like Sora was, I feel like was very hyped, and I never got really much usable out of it. Like for the projects I was working on, it was
Yeah.
outside of photorealism, and uh, the looping tool was really great for me there. But otherwise, yeah, I just it was like too much hallucination in a lot of the output that I had. So um, so
I think
yeah, there's some of that in the doc.
yeah, that's probably what people would want to see though, is more of the hot takes, because there's a lot of marketing speak out there that's kind of bullshitty. I think the reason the OpenAI thing was hyped is because they just released a trailer video like 9 months before it was public, and so by the time it was public, it was just so far behind. Like, so, but they were smart to like get ahead of it, and now I think for a lot of non-technical folks or folks who aren't in the know like you are, Chris, like Sora still has like a brand around it of like, oh, that's really good for video, because they were first, right? They were the first to show the evidence of things like object permanence. But per our last point, like these things don't last long. Like nobody's king for more than a week or two. So releasing your hype video 9 months out is pretty bold in an industry that moves this fast. Um, do you think, one follow up question on that, Chris, is what do you think the underlying mechanism for why it seems, I mean, certainly in LLMs, there's differences in, Claude is better at coding and maybe they have different kind of demeanors, certainly. But for the most part, they have very, very similar like knowledge base. They have a very similar capabilities, mostly just related to like kind of the size of the model is what's going to determine the capabilities, um, or the amount of data that was put into it. Um, do you think that's, but whereas for what you're saying for image is that they're much more different. It's like this one's really good at line drawings, whereas we don't have that. It's not like this one is really good at talking about like French history and this one's really good at like, bongo drums or something. Like we don't have that in LLMs. So is that just because the training data is um, more universal across all the LLMs, and there's kind of just like less diversity in like the set of text on the internet, and we've already just got all of it into every model, and therefore there's less like alpha there, and the images have way more like opportunity to like train on different kind of like lower like niche images. And so like if you pulled this like one niche artist into your training data, is it mostly about that, or is it that there's like somehow fundamental trade-offs in a way that LLMs don't seem to have, where when you get smarter at 2D line drawings, like you actually get dumber at like photorealistic faces or something like that? um which one is it? Do you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know personally, like what the answer is, but when I see some of these new models launch, so like Runway had image model called Frames that came out, and it's like very, very good at like a cinematic feel. And at the time when it launched, people had mentioned like, oh, that's because it was trained on still frames from films, and so
Right.
like a big part of its training data came from that, or some of these models that were trained specifically on certain artists more than others, or styles like that tend to do that, and it almost like influences the output overall. And you'll see this a lot in kind of like the color, like tones, like it'll be warmer, or like mid journey color palettes, like very, very like vibrant usually. And and so it's so yeah, my hunch is that it may be kind of like skewed on some of the training data,
The data.
and that
It seems like everything comes down to data. That was my intuition as well, as opposed to like something fundamentally different about the trade-offs in these types of models. I know that there's a term that's used as transfer learning within LLMs, and an example of that would be like when we trained it on more code data, it actually got smarter at thinking about like physics problems or even like emotional problems. Like just reasoning in general got better when we trained it on more code, and the only difference was the extra code data. So they call that transfer learning. Is it almost that in the image model though, there's a little bit of the opposite effect where like if you train it on too much like anime porn, like it gets like really bad at like, I don't know, realistic stuff. I don't know. Bad example, but you see my point. When you train it too much on one thing, it actually like makes the other things worse.
Yeah, yeah, that certainly happens. So like, I'd say like a common criticism people have of like the Flux image model is that like backgrounds are a bit blurred, and like it always kind of has this like bokeh effect in the background going on, and it's very hard to like prompt out of that. And so people criticize it, saying it's more of like a fine-tuned model as opposed to kind of like a generic base model that and so yeah, I think like uh there are like a good base model was kind of trained on a huge variety of styles without, say, overfitting on a certain style that'll just influence the output that way. And I suspect it's maybe similar with language models. I don't know. I mean, the language models are getting so large now that I think I don't know. It would be it's probably like harder to overfit, I guess, something like that, unless there was just a huge wealth of text data in a certain style and things. But
Right. Yeah. Well, this I think is a good transition into our last topic on the docket, which is Gemini 2.5 Pro. But my sense of that issue with LLMs is that, let's say from like late 2022 when ChatGPT launched until maybe like a year ago, it seemed like the narrative was that all the models are converging. They're all converging to the same place. And now, maybe in the last 12 to 9 months or so, it seems like the opposite narrative has started to take hold, that actually there is, in language models, there's a little bit more divergence, which is more like what you're describing with the image models, Chris. So I think that's probably largely about the data sets as well, and that the data sets are becoming more proprietary. Like, for example, Grok was just bought Twitter, or X. I'll always call it Twitter. I'm never calling it X. They just bought Twitter for like 33 billion, and now they just have that data set. So it's like, it seems like it's becoming much more about who has the unique data sets that no one else will have. So no one else will ever be able to train on the Twitter Firehouse, whereas Grok will always have that. So that's a huge alpha for them, right? In terms of real time and all kinds of other things. So, and then people are like, oh, Google has YouTube. So maybe that's why Gemini they were able to like transcribe every YouTube video and put that in there. I've heard rumors of that, but then none of them released their actual data sets explicitly, except maybe DeepSeek. I think they did. But anyway, so I think the fact that they're diverging is a good transition into Gemini 2.5 Pro, which it seems like the two use cases I've seen people talk about for Gemini 2.5 Pro is, number one, like really strong, like creative writing. Seems really, really good at that. And then it's also really good at code. So potentially better than 3.5 or even 3.7 Sonnet, which has been for a long time, like a surprisingly long time, like almost a year, has been kind of like the king of code models, which a year is a long time to be the king on that. It seems like Gemini 2.5 Pro, and both in my experience using it over the past few days in Cursor, but also just anecdotally, I've heard other folks agree that like it's potentially better at code than Claude Sonnet. So that's a big deal. And I think also, again, is another example that like the models are more diverging now at this point in the life cycle of this technology. So has anyone else used the model or have any hot takes on Gemini?
I've used Gemini more in Cursor, and there's actually a setting in Cursor where you can set it to set the max model. So the max model actually gives you the full 1 million tokens. You can do the same with Claude 3.7 Sonnet. That gives you the 200,000 tokens. Otherwise, it would just give you 120,000 tokens. And this is from cursor.com/settings/models. They have an actual output there that shows this. Mm-hmm. And so there is a difference between the Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental at 120,000 tokens when it runs, and then versus the full context window. And when I'm running the max model, I do find that Gemini inserts a lot of comments, which is actually extremely helpful for me. I'm still learning React and I'm still learning Next.js, and it's really good at one-shotting like the first basic prototype, but it doesn't write out all the error cases, but it does leave comments saying, hey, you want to account for more errors, and these are the kind of errors that you want to account for as well. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate those actual details because I do review the code that is generated, and then I go through and it's like, okay, in my mind, I'm already building up test cases and things I still need to finish out. And the comments that I read from Google Gemini, leaving those extra comments helps me out too. It's like, oh, yay, thank you. Thank you for putting that in as I'm doing like the code review. So that's been super helpful. And I find that I use the 3.7 Sonnet Max model and it doesn't leave those types of comments there. And so it can be a little bit deceiving if you're reviewing the code and then have to kind of think through things a little bit more. So I have been enjoying the new 2.5 Pro model for implementing features. I feel like I can move lightning fast now with Cursor. And then in Cursor specifically, I set up the MDC rules files. So I used to typically just have one giant big rules file. Now I have things separated. So I have one for a specific design system saying, I'm using Shad CN components. And then whenever you're referencing that, here's how I prefer to install with Bun, and I give it the commands and those like very specific things. And then I saw someone posting about this is actually how they do like their Prisma generations. So they actually have a MDC rule file for that. And so they have, a file that would say anytime we're inserting features, this is my preferred React pattern with React hook form. And, they do those types of things. And basically kind of, it's almost like being a hands-on user using like Devon or something like that. But I feel like I move way fast. Like, I don't know, there's something about the releases in the last month. I feel like my speed of code output is really fast, very accurate, very precise and focused. So I'm really pleased with this new model. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think your only mistake there, Ray, is to actually be reading and reviewing your code. You're supposed to just hit enter and it'll get, or shift enter, I guess. Command enter. The one that accepts all, whatever the one that accepts all and just YOLOs it and pushes to production. Yeah, I think my take, I had a take on this on Twitter a few weeks ago, but like my take is that with these new coding models, and I agree that Gemini 2.5 Pro, it's actually my preferred model now. I haven't quite liked in Cursor where you can just say auto. Partly maybe it's just like a control thing. It's like the same reason I don't like to be the passenger in a car. I like to be driving. Like, I just want to know that like I know which model I'm using. Like, it's probably honestly better for me to just go auto because I think they're doing something smart under the hood of like assessing how complex the query is or something and swapping. And probably also looking at like which which endpoints are coming back fast versus slow right now based on load, and swapping based on that. So it's probably really smart. But I usually like to just pick a model because then I kind of like at least know what I'm doing. But it seems to me that like the alpha for coders now, as these models get so good at code, is really just going to be the same thing that I actually think, like when you're a junior engineer, there's like certain skills of like being able to debug or like knowing how to use breakpoints or stuff like that. It's like kind of like the nuts and bolts. And then you get more like maybe mid-level, and it becomes more about like, okay, setting people's expectations and being able to like work on a team and like being able to estimate how long your stuff is going to take. But then when you get really senior, I think it's much more about like understanding how to articulate what like the goal or like the design, and you almost become like more like a product manager, and the code becomes relatively easier, but you also have deep understanding of the code. And I feel like the people who are going to succeed in this new world are going to be the people who've always been able to move up to like that top level. And the alpha for the skill that's going to be important is not going to be like, I know how to use breakpoints or like I know the syntax of Rust or whatever. It's going to be the people who understand their customers and understand like what the design requirements should be, and are able to then articulate that in English clearly. And so, yeah, I think it's really exciting time for like people who were already maybe a little pat on the back or self-serving, but like people who are already like senior engineers and like good at what they do. I think it's going to multiply us massively. But I think for folks who are, I kind of feel bad for people who are just getting started, because it seems like pretty daunting at this point. I'm not quite sure what you would focus on when you have Gemini 2.5 able to produce way better code than you know. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if we kind of like almost like kill a whole generation of developers who never learn the basics, who never learn the skills. But I guess it's always been that way. Like people, when the car came out, people are like, they're never going to learn how to ride a horse. Like, this is horrible, like,
Yeah, I think there's like, I don't know, the call it like product engineers, or it's almost like just developing that other skill, like you said, of if you're able to give the model like a very like a tech spec almost, or like a very detailed like product spec, yeah, you can get incredible results quickly. But yeah, so it's almost like that type of skill will have a higher value, and along with the coding. But yeah, that's kind of it. And for kind of like newer engineers starting out, there's, I think, that skill is important, but then there's also just like now kind of like maintaining these and building these like agent systems, or kind of like a lot of these things where there can be some really great value in that as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're doing a lot of that, guys, in your work too, but that's certainly something that trying to build out these like workflows and automation for things like that, I think is still, I'm still doing that kind of stuff. So
are you seeing a distinction there, Chris, between like, for example, like building front ends for like a website, or maybe like a simple create, read, update, delete type of backend? Like that is clearly something Cursor with Gemini and Sonnet is able to do. But you're seeing like people who are building AI agents in code. Like, is it that are you saying that like that's a different skill set, in that the type of coding is not um, it's not as good at that type of coding because it involves like a lot of like long prompts and that kind of thing, and it's almost like a different way of thinking about it because it's less structured? Is that what you mean?
I think it's like we're just seeing certain type of work. So say like front end coding, that has like the speed and pace of that has just dramatically increased. And but there's certain things like say um, say like you need to like build an internal tool for like content management or something for a system. The speed of that is dramatically increased as well, but it's less about like simply just, simple prompts for like front end development. That's more about like building kind of like workflows and connecting like a whole front end system and back end system and all of these other things, and making architectural decisions around like the database and all of that. So it's almost like orchestrating a lot of what you can get out of these models. They'll give you all of that if you want, but you kind of have to learn how to work with them on more complex projects like that.
Yeah, I think on the front end piece, there's an app called Builder.io, and they have a Figma plugin that basically takes the SVG or some form of the Figma output, and they have their own custom models like fine-tuned on this, and then it specifically generates the code for you in your code base like style, across any framework that whether it's React or Svelte or whatever. And that's pretty freaking amazing, because then it's basically like designers can go directly to production. So that's pretty cool, and it makes sense that the level of structure in a Figma file is sufficient to build the front end. Like fundamentally, like the amount of information in the Figma file is sufficient for a smart model to fill in like small gaps of like, when it's a very small screen size, like this button should move down, or there are going to be things like that I think over time they will get better at that stuff. Right now, those are some of the gaps, but I feel like, yeah, people are already also hooking up like fast feedback loops where you can have it. And I think Windsurf actually just launched this maybe 2 weeks ago. It's like baked into the Windsurf system, where like there's a browser right there, and then it can basically just take screenshots. And so it already knows that it looks bad. Now, those image models are not that great. They're getting better, I think, but like they're not that great at like noticing certain types of things that to us humans are very obvious. Like, oh, this looks horrible because these colors are clashing or the text is overlapping. Like they're not always great at picking that stuff up and then translating that into how to change the code. So I think there's still a bit of a gap there, but that feels like a gap that's definitely not going to last long. I mean, there's a lot of signal rich data that you can automate and feedback. And so I feel like that's in 6 months, I feel very confident that problem will be solved by folks like maybe Windsurf who automate the loop there of like, look at the browser, look at the code base, notice the bugs visually on the screen, fix the code base, make sure the bugs are fixed. Oh, they're still not fixed. Okay, fix it again. Okay, now they are fixed. And then like commit, like that loop feels highly automatable. And at that point,
I think
we're all
the short term,
we're all product managers and designers at that point. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Oh, yeah. With Windsurf, you can actually click the elements and it'll pass those into Windsurf as like the div dot whatever it is,
right.
For the DOM, which is nice to continue the conversation. But to add to where value is going to be available maybe for the next 1 to 5 years, I'd say maybe even for the next decade. To be honest, even if you're still learning engineering, there's an extreme amount of value in quality assurance testing. And when I say that, I say more like an actual end-to-end integration testing. And that's probably actually one of Apple's secret sauces at the very beginning, is that they had like a very dedicated team of people who would just literally test the entire system end to end. I mean, they have thousands of projects that build to make the entire operating system. And you can imagine all the types of architectures and devices, and there's like no amount of code. You'd have to write like 3 times the amount of code just for testing every part of the stack. But the fastest result is literally, what is the user going to do when they start to grab the device and use it? And so within that skill set, especially with these AI models, now you can actually take the device and start testing yourself and seeing all the bugs, and then now actually start interacting with the code base directly with the LLM, and then start to understand how a stack actually works. And it's just kind of like, if you're in college, you can learn super fast about how something you're curious about really works, and then sort of start to reverse engineer and then start to build and be your own architect that way. And then you'll be able to better architect by looking at other architectures and maybe mimicking them or rebuilding them from scratch and stuff. And I feel like, maybe the 4 years that it would take you to learn something now can get compressed down into like 1 year or even, a quarter of that. And you can probably learn just as fast as you could somewhere else. And I feel like maybe if you haven't been in code for a while, it might encourage, so I feel like both sides are going to kind of start to kind of converge towards the center again in some funny way. And it's going to create maybe more work for these types of folks, because I would value someone on my team that was maybe really young that just wants to play with my system and start breaking it like a user would. So that way I can understand, out of all the bugs that I see, which one is actually the highest priority to fix. Because that's another thing that's like a testing methodology thing of, which out of all the bugs you have, which one do you fix first? And actually, how do you reproduce that? That's usually really hard type of data to get. So,
yeah, that's fantastic career advice. Ray, you have a background in quality engineering, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of how I started out. It's like getting in the door, literally plugging devices in and restoring them, to like understanding build systems, to kernel level things, and all the way up and down the stack. And it was through that methodology of learning and applying and getting into these systems, you get in the weeds of stuff, and then you can go really deep on anything you're interested in. But then it all makes sense as a giant system, and it repeats itself in many different places all over the stack.
Yeah, well, I think no matter what happens, whether Gemini 3.5 or 7.5, like, I think regardless of all of that, like, whoever is willing and able to roll up their sleeves and be at the cutting edge and play with the things and actually like get their hands dirty, those are the folks that are going to win no matter what. So yeah, that's a great way to wrap. Some wise career advice from Ray. Go, if you don't know what you're doing and you're listening to us, go start just trying to break things, and then maybe figure out how you can fix them after you've broken them. Okay, that's a great way to wrap. Dan, you were unusually quiet. I think you have a gag order, so maybe next month you'll have a lot more to share.
You guys were in danger of me talking about Gemini 2.5 Pro for like 10 minutes straight, but we'll save it for later.
Oh, do you not want to? I mean, I can go over.
No, I think it's fine.
Let him cook.
Do your 90-second version of it. Do your 90-second version. Come on.
Okay, well, yeah, I was going to say a little bit about Gemini 2.5 Pro being actually more intelligent, not just better for coding.
Yeah.
Really echoing the way you kicked it off, Tyler, which is that there was this period for a long time where people were expecting models to converge and plateau. And then recently there's been talk of models diverging and not plateauing. This is a significant update towards the latter, but I was kind of a believer in the latter anyway. So if we're doing our AI timelines, or even just planning for the future, if you're trying to think, for example, how much agentic stuff should I be expecting in my coding environment? Should I just let Claude Code go nuts on my stuff, or is that far away from working?
Yeah.
New models that are smarter, not just like better on some dimension for trading off something else, but actually more intelligent, should be a significant update that stuff is coming. I won't go into too much detail, but I did run some synthesis for some client work that was significantly better with Gemini 2.5 Pro compared to Claude 3.7. GPT 4.5 is still kind of a mystery to me. But yeah, Claude 3.7, as you put it, Tyler, was kind of king for a long time. You mentioned it as being king in coding, but I think it was just the smartest, just full stop smartest model for a very long time. And this is a disruption of that, which I think is a very good thing and a very serious signal that we should expect more actual raw intelligence and problem solving coming out of these things.
Yeah. Maybe being best at coding is the same thing as being smartest, which as software engineers, we would like to think. So
yeah, for this group, for this audience, maybe, but there's a big world out there.
Nope, there's only one skill that matters, which is writing code. All right, guys. Great. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.